This morning I was reading in Genesis 28, the words up on the screen. Jacob left Beersheba and went to Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. He dreamed, and behold, there was a stairwell. Picture a Mesopotamian ziggurat. It looks like, I think this is what the image is. I think this is what he pictures. Not a ladder, but a stairwell. The stairwell is actually a temple. That's what the ziggurats were. It was an ancient Mesopotamian pyramid. So the Egyptians would build their pyramids with three sides, like so, but the Mesopotamians built them with stairs, and so this was actually tiered. So there it was square on top, like this, and then it would come down like so, all the way around. And so you have the image, I think, of a temple, and the temple is connecting heaven and earth. And what it says is what he envisions in his dream is that the top of this, so I just wouldn't have translated it ladder. I think this is the idea, that there are steps that were going up to heaven, and he's envisioning, okay, there's a temple connecting heaven and earth, and on these steps are moving back and forth angels of God ascending and descending. So the question is, what do these angels and what do these steps have to do with the promise that then comes forth? And behold, Yahweh stood either beside him or actually on the stairwell or on the top up in the heavens. But he sees Yahweh. However, we're supposed to understand the preposition here. He sees Yahweh standing, and then he gets this proclamation: I am Yahweh, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac, the land on which you lie. So he's here. He's sleeping, and his head is on a stone. And God is talking about this turf. And he sees God, then there's angels going up and down, and God says, the land on which you're standing, or the land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring. And your offspring will be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, to the north and the south. In you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. I'm with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So my question is, what's the point of the angels? They're ascending and descending on this stairwell up to heaven that's connecting heaven and earth. And out of this, heaven comes down to Jacob, who is leaving Canaan to find a wife. But he will come back to Canaan. And the point is, there's a connection between you and heaven. You can be confident that I am with you and I will fulfill the promises of the land that I have given you. You're going to be bountiful and I'll fulfill the promises of offspring that I've given you. Now, why I pondered this is because in John 1, Jesus decides to go to Galilee, and he finds Philip. And Philip passes the word. He tells Philip, "Follow me." And so then Philip goes and finds Nathanael, who says, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." So Moses, book of Genesis, wrote about Jesus. Nathanael says, "We found him." The prophets wrote about Jesus. "We found that man. It is Jesus, the son of Nazareth." So Nathanael says to him, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" It's intriguing that Nazareth is the same root as Nazir, meaning branch, that we saw, the messianic branch from the Old Testament. Similarly, Nazarite has the same root as the branch. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Well, maybe like the new creation, maybe like the branch. Philip said, "Come and see." So Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, and he said, "Behold an Israelite, indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Now, I'm not sure about this. I'm trying to figure it out. I haven't looked at any commentaries, but we're about to head back to Genesis. John is going to quote Genesis 28. And what does Jacob mean but deceiver? Now we found a man in whom there is no deceit. It's like he's a new Jacob. I'm not sure what's going on here. But Nathanael Philip recognizes Jesus is the Messiah. Nathanael is wondering, is he the Messiah? And Jesus says, okay, we have a guy in whom there is no deceit, no guile. And Nathanael says to Jesus, "How do you know me?" Jesus said, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Jesus was not there. But he had a connection with Philip like God had a connection with Jacob in the story we just read. He knew where Jacob was. He met with Jacob right where he was. "Rabbi, you are the Son of God." Something about this declaration identifies for Nathanael Jesus' identity, a distinctiveness. Someone who has come from heaven to earth. You're the one. I know you're the one. You're the King of Israel. And Jesus said, "Is it because I said I saw you under the fig tree that you believe in me? You will see greater things than these." And he said, here it is, "Truly you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." So I'm pondering what's going on here in John 1. Because in Genesis 28, the angels are ascending and descending on the steps. And the steps seem to represent a temple. In John 2, Jesus will declare himself the temple. "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will tear it down." And he was talking about the temple of his body. I mean, that's in the very next episode after this text in John 1:51. Jesus is the connection between heaven and earth. The angels are ascending and descending on him. And in Genesis 28, God appears, and it's somehow in light of this connection, as the angels are ascending and descending, that Jacob hears about the land promise, hears about the seed promise. That what I've promised Abraham will be fulfilled. And it's going to come to him as God from heaven moves to earth on this stairwell. And Jesus is the stairwell. Jesus is the means by which God will fulfill his promises to Abraham. And so every promise is yes. How do we connect with God? Jacob connected with God while he laid down, he has a dream, and he meets God, the God of heaven, who's ruling all things. They connect with each other through this stairwell. And John says Jesus is the stairwell. You want to connect with heaven and earth? You want to see the promises of God fulfilled? It's through Jesus. It's a striking text that John is thinking about Genesis 28. And I don't have it all down yet, but the Old Testament is being used by John, and he's thinking about Genesis 28, and what Genesis 28 describes as steps, he says that's Jesus. The angels are ascending and descending on the steps in Genesis 28. The angels are ascending and descending on Jesus in John 1. He's the connection between heaven and earth. And that connection is being portrayed, I think, in the minds of ancient Israel or in the minds of Moses. What he is seeing as God reveals it to him regarding Jacob, even if this was likely even written down. The story was written down. It was maintained through the patriarchs, through Joseph, through the years in Egypt, all the way to Moses. And then Moses collects that material, and God guides him to write it down in a book. It becomes the book of Genesis. So I think Moses is using probably written tradition. Genesis 5 verse 1 says, the Sefer, that is the book or the scroll of Adam, this is the book of the scroll of Adam, of the generations of Adam. That's what it says. This is the scroll of the generations of Adam, letting us see that something was written down on a scroll. The histories of Adam, that is that which came forth from Adam, was written down. And now Moses, hundreds of years later, is drawing on that material. So it was likely written down, but now Moses is giving it to us in the book of Genesis. And what did he see? How did he understand? That's our question. What did he understand about this stairwell that was connecting heaven and earth? And it seems likely to me that it's this idea of a pyramid or a temple. And Jesus is that connection by which the promises of God are fulfilled. Every promise is yes in Jesus. How is that possible? John is setting us up to understand it. He is the mediator between heaven and earth. There is no benefit that came to Jacob. There's no benefit that comes to us except through Christ. He is the one through whom we encounter God. He brings God to us. So that's as far as I got today. I read other texts, but that was the one that captured my thought, and it was enough to help me worship. That I could pause reading Genesis 28, recognizing its use in John 1, and say, praise Jesus for bringing God to me, for making a yes of every one of the promises given to Abraham through him. Today we get to revel in the person and work of Jesus. We're just going to celebrate the most graphic portrayal of the Messiah in all the Old Testament. The most expanded, clear, detailed description of the Messiah's person and work as king, as servant, and as Messiah, an anointed conqueror. And I pray that our hearts can stand in awe of the beauty we're about to behold. He brings God to us. So let's open in prayer. Father, it is by your strength and your wisdom that we walk. Where else can we go? You alone hold the words of eternal life. It's not by might or by power, but by your Spirit. Thank you for the Spirit of Christ who mediates to us all the fullness of God. You who have all authority in heaven and on earth, overcome resistance in our hearts today. Give us ears to hear and eyes to see, hearts that understand. Make us holy. Thank you for the privilege of calling, the privilege of being declared your children. Open your word to us, I pray, through Jesus and for Jesus. Amen. We are in Isaiah 11. So here's our term again, netzer, branch. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. Who is Jesse? David's father. Why doesn't it say, like we saw in Jeremiah 23, I will give for David a righteous branch? Why doesn't it say, there will come forth from the shoot, forth a shoot from the stump of David? Why does it say a stump of Jesse? Jesus is the new David. So he's making a different point. This is not simply the promised offspring of David. He is a new David. He's a new founder of the dynasty. He's the new son of Jesse. He's the ultimate son of Jesse that David's life only pointed to. So, there shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. So the branch there is the same term that we saw in Isaiah 4, in Jeremiah 23. The branch will bear fruit. And then we read, the Spirit of Yahweh will rest on him. In Ezekiel 36, I will take out your heart of stone, put in a heart of flesh, and I will put my Spirit in you. Now the Spirit of God is resting on this person. And in the book of Isaiah, what we're going to see is this building image that before the people enjoy the Spirit, the Messiah enjoys the Spirit. Before the people will be resurrected, the Messiah will be resurrected. That He is the one in whom we rest and through whom we enjoy all access to God. Isaiah is going to lay out that entire picture. The Spirit is resting on this one. This is the first time that we learn that the child king, the Son born, whose name is Emmanuel, whose name is Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, he'll enjoy the very presence of God upon him. So that when he speaks and when he walks and when he plays, God is upon him. He is like a movable temple. Wherever he goes, God is. And this is the first of three passages. One here dealing with the king, the mention of that royal Davidic figure from Isaiah 9. Now here he is again. The Spirit is on him. Isaiah portrays the Christ in three ways. In Isaiah 1 through 30, 1 through 39, he is portrayed as a king. In Isaiah 40 to 55, he's portrayed as the servant. And from Isaiah 56 to 66, he's portrayed as an anointed conqueror. So he's called the Messiah, that he's one who's been anointed only in Isaiah 61. It doesn't call him the servant there. It doesn't call him the king. But God does call the same figure the servant in Isaiah 42:55. And my point here is that in Isaiah 42, it's the servant upon whom the Spirit rests. In Isaiah 61, it's the anointed one upon whom the Spirit rests. And here, it's the king upon whom the Spirit rests. And so it suggests they're all the same figure. There's a number of Old Testament scholars, you read their commentaries, and there's no proof that the king is still the servant, is the anointed one. And I'm saying one of the figures that ties them all together is the same language of the Spirit rests on him. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he's anointed me to bring good news to the poor. Jesus says, that's me. The New Testament authors are going to draw on the king text, the servant text, and the anointed one text and apply all of them to Jesus. We'll see that today in Isaiah 11. So there's a branch that's going to bear fruit. Out of his life is new creation. The stump of Jesse that has a shoot. He has the Spirit of God upon him, and then it defines that Spirit. It's a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and might, a spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. He's one who delights in God, who delights in fearing God. And then we get a whole bunch of royal language and armor language. So notice what it says. He's a judge. And when he judges fairly. Not by the appearance, that is, by the face, by the eyes, by what his ears hear. Not what's on the outside, but he assesses the situation to truly know what is real. He brings justice. With righteousness, he judges the poor in accordance with God's right order and for God's glory. He decides with equity for the meek. He strikes the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips, he kills the wicked. Then notice what it says in verse 5. Righteousness is the belt that he wears, and faithfulness is what binds up his loins. So that's what I mean by armor. He has garment language is associated with the Messiah. So he is a just king who with his very words will be a killer of the wicked. This is the first time that we read he has a ministry of speech. And that speech is powerful such that he does not have to draw a sword. His lips are the sword. And that's exactly how in Isaiah 49 he's going to be described. That from his mouth comes a sharp sword. We see it again in Revelation 20, in Revelation 19. The one riding on the white horse has a double-edged sword coming from his mouth. That's a weird image, but the point is all he has to speak. He just has to speak. And the power of his word brings about his purpose. And in that context, it's a defeating purpose, an overcoming of his enemy's purpose. And all he has to say is, be gone, and they're gone. That's what happens with the demons. His words are like a sharp sword that pierces. So, first up, the promise of this king's rise. That's what we've just seen. He's coming. He's the new king, son of Jesse. And where he goes, God is, because the Lord's Spirit rests on him. He is a royal figure and he's like a temple. You want to meet God? Meet him through Jesus. That's how it's going to happen. And what keeps him modest is a belt of righteousness. What upholds his garment, allowing him to move freely and do whatever he wants to do, is faithfulness. So what's the impact of his coming? This just king arrives. The Spirit of God is upon him. What's the impact of his coming? We read that in verse 6 through 9. When he arrives, this is what happens. The wolf will lie down with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the young goat, the calf and the lion and the fattened calf together, and then it says, a little child will lead them. Now, until I taught through Isaiah, I didn't teach every verse, but I preached 1-hour sermons 53 times. And when I was getting right up close to the end of what I was going to do, I had to decide how many sermons, and I decided 53 on Isaiah is pretty good. So I ended there. And my vision was to teach on messianic high points in the book of Isaiah. And when I came to Isaiah 11, I think I saw something that the commentators don't point to. The commentators view this text simply as saying, when we think about the eschatological day, there's going to be perfect peace. Predators will be no more. Indeed, it's going to be so safe that a child could walk beside a lion and not fear. But when I'm reading Isaiah, I've already heard about a child. There's only one child in the book. A son will be born. His name will be Emmanuel. Chapter 7. Chapter 9. What does it say? For unto us a child is born. A son is given. And the government will be upon his shoulders as he sits on David's throne. That's Isaiah 11. He has magnificent names that show his very identity is God with us. I propose this is not any child, it's the child. A child will lead them. Now this is tricky. Is this just talking about perfect peace? Or is this, as is the case in Daniel, how are nations portrayed in the book of Daniel? How? As beasts. Is that what we're talking about? Is this an allusion back to Isaiah 2, where the nations gather, they throw away their swords, and they change their swords into gardening tools, meaning the nations are in perfect peace and they're working together for the same common cause. Regardless, I think there's more than just a setting of peace. I want to propose the child here. A child that leads them is the child we've already referred to. He's the one that's talked about in the beginning of the passage. I'm going to try to prove that very shortly. The cow and the bear will graze together. The bear isn't eating meat, it's eating grass. The young shall lie down together. They're young. The lion shall eat straw like an ox. And then it says, the nursing child shall play over the hole of the cobra. So is this just like you don't have to be afraid of snakes? Or is this an allusion to something we've read about in the story? Notice that this is no longer animal alongside animal. Predator and prey are no longer at odds, but they're at perfect peace. Lion, lamb, leopard, goat, calf, lion, bear, cow. No, now it's this child and a serpent. Isaiah only uses this language. Do you see where it says the nursing child in the ESV? That word, watch this. Where are we at? 11 verse 8. This word, yonek, right here. It's nursing child. Yonek. What it means is a suckling. And it's only used 2 times in the entire book of Isaiah. So yanak is to suckle, to knead. It's what a baby does when getting milk from a mother, but it's also what a small plant does in order to grow. It gets water. It draws it in. And the verb is yanak, but this is the participle form, yonek, mean it's one who suckles. So I go and I say, tell me, first off, in the book of Isaiah, I want to know where else does this form show up. So I say, search for the lexeme. 2 texts. What chapter are we in? Isaiah 53. So Isaiah is making a connection, and what is it? He grew up before him like a young plant. That's exactly the same word, like a nursing one. But then it says the nursing, the suckling, in Isaiah 53 is in a plant context, because it says, and like a dry root out of the ground. Well, this figure in the earlier part of the chapter is already called a sprout coming forth from the stump of Jesse. And here, the one who grows, in Isaiah 53, who's the he? It's the servant who grows up before Yahweh like a young plant, like a root out of the dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, no beauty that we should desire him. And Isaiah, I think, is using the term in only these 2 contexts to say the one who's in Isaiah 53 is the one I'm talking about in Isaiah 11. So let's go back to the text. And you only get here, if you're not pausing and studying the text, and it's almost like when you're in Isaiah 53, when you're in Isaiah 11, it's less clear. But all of a sudden you get to Isaiah 53, and it brings you backwards. And you're like, those are the same people. I'm a Siganello. Thank you. Those are the same people. So let's look. A child is going to lead these beasts. Why are they at peace? Because he's in control. And it's just a child king. It's just a young one. Then it says, a nursing child is playing over the hole of the cobra. A weaned child has put his hand on the adder's den. An adder, a cobra. Both of them serpents. And this child is not scared of that serpent in the least. And all of a sudden, Genesis 3:15 comes to my mind. Offspring of the woman, offspring of the serpent. Many offspring of the serpent, like Pharaoh. Offspring of the woman, Christ. head to head, at odds with one another, entering into a battle. This child plays over the hole of the cobra. A weaned child puts his hand over the adder's den as if it's ready to grab it. No fear. On mission. Ensuring peace. Now, this language in verses 8 and 9. Look at verse 9. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. God's holy mountain. Where have we heard of that already in Isaiah? First text, Isaiah 2. It's where the nations all gather to hear the law of the Lord and where they take all their weapons and make them into garden tools. Second time we heard of the mountain of God. Where was it? Remember where Isaiah and Jeremiah 3 about the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, now all of Jerusalem is the throne of God. And in Isaiah he talks about the same thing with the presence of God hovering over all of Jerusalem, the glory cloud. Where was that? Isaiah 4. This is the third time now that we hear about the mountain of the Lord. 7 mountaintop texts in Isaiah. The mountain is always the mountain of God. So it's as if what Isaiah is doing is bringing us to the mountain, and he's bringing us to the mountain from 7 different roads. But all the roads lead in the same direction. But as we would expect, as we approach the mountain from a different direction, we look at it from a new angle. And I think all of these mountaintop texts are talking about exactly the same mountain, the exact same time, from different perspectives. They're all tied together. Isaiah 2, Isaiah 4, Isaiah 11. They're all linked up. You see a high temple in Isaiah 2, in which the nations stream. That's how it's described. When will it happen? In the latter days. What's the nature? It's a multi-ethnic, international influx to a transformed Jerusalem in order to be taught by Yahweh. And what's the result? Yahweh will work justice and bring global peace. Well, what about Isaiah 4? What do we see in that mountaintop text? The description, the garden worship center, which is made holy and overshadowed by Yahweh's tabernacling presence. The timing, it'll happen at the day of the Lord. So we have the latter days, and then we have, when's this coming? At the day of the Lord. What's the nature? All those recorded for life in Jerusalem will have been made holy through judgment, resulting in fruitfulness. It's like bounty and a branch, a new creation growing. You can't even see this, can you? Bummer. What's the nature? All those recorded for life will have been made holy and will be fruitful, and the result? The city of Jerusalem and its inhabitants will enjoy Yahweh's presence. They will become the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies. Just as the glory cloud was resting on the Ark, now that glory cloud will rest on all of Jerusalem. And I'm proposing Isaiah 2 as a mountaintop text and Isaiah 4 as a mountaintop text are talking about the same reality. Well, now we come back to the mountain. And we find out that God is doing His reigning through a child king who has a word-oriented ministry and whose very life is bringing peace. So what do we have? The description, you have a blossoming garden. He's like a branch. It's a shoot will rise, and it'll produce fruit. That's how the chapter opened. So it's like a new garden is being created as the Spirit rests on this individual. The blossoming garden of peace that stands at the center of the Spirit-empowered King's global rule. When will it happen? When a shoot from Jesse rises. What's the nature of his work? A Spirit-empowered King will work justice on the earth, working for the poor and punishing the wicked. And what will the result be? Perfect peace on Yahweh's holy mountain as the whole earth is full of the knowledge of Yahweh. And then we learn in verse 10, in that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a signal for the peoples. Of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. How was this king described in verse 1? In relation to Jesse. How was he described? What? How was this king described in relation to Jesse in verse 1? So Jesse is on the bottom, and the shoot is coming out of Jesse. How's he described in verse 10? He's the root of Jesse. So consider what's going on here. He's not only the one coming forth from Jesse genealogically, chronologically, he's Jesse's source. There was no Jesse apart from him. This is a divine statement. So what I want to do is go to two texts and show how this is reflected upon. Number one, we're going to go to the end of Isaiah, Isaiah 65. Keep your hand in Isaiah 11 so you can compare the texts. Isaiah 65, it's another mountaintop text. It's up on my chart. Verse 17 of Isaiah 65 tells us what we're talking about. Solomon, why don't you read for us verses 17 and 18 for starters, and then we're going to jump ahead to verse 25. Behold, I create new heavens and new earth. Behold, I create Jerusalem. The way that it's shaped, here's the two possibilities. Is Jerusalem a city on the new earth? Or is Jerusalem the new earth? Do you see the difference? You have an entire earth on which is a city named Jerusalem. Or is it that Jerusalem, which is the very center of God, has now expanded, fulfilling Genesis 1:28, fill the earth, expand the garden, let paradise circle the globe, so that everywhere you go is Jerusalem. There's no more Babylon. I think that's the idea. And John gets that idea from Isaiah. Because Isaiah is the one who said, God through Isaiah, behold, I create the new heavens and new earth. Behold, look at it. I create Jerusalem. Then we jump to the mountain. Solomon, read for us 25. What is the same and what is different between the description given in Isaiah 11 and now Isaiah 65? There's similarities, but there's some difference. What do you see that would be the same, and what do you see that would be different regarding the mountain? Yeah, the relationship of the animals, the description is very comparable between the two. There's perfect peace in the animal kingdom. What else? What else would be the same? What else is similar? Yep, verse 25 with chapter 11. There's one other major similarity. In fact, it's word for word quotation. Solomon? They shall not hurt nor destroy on all my holy mountain. That's exactly the same. And it's the mention of the animals, and they shall not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, that shows when we get to Isaiah 65, he wants us to remember Isaiah 11. But what's the major difference? What is different about the servant? Dagam? What's different?
The serpent?
Yes, with respect to the serpent. He's still what? He's eating dust. Was he eating dust in chapter 11? He wasn't. He was in his hole. Now, the mention of the dust, what does that take us back to? Genesis 3:15, where he's judged in the dust. And from that point forward, all throughout Scripture, the dust appears to have, when it's used, it's an expression of judgment. To be down in the dust is, it's similar to, it appears, the language of the sandal in the book of Ruth. There's something in, if you put someone under your feet, you're shaming them. If they're down below you, I mean, why do people bow down at the feet of someone? To show that the one that's standing is higher. You put yourself down in the dust to show that you've been put down. And it seems as though there's a movement from, in chapter 11, the child king is ready to act. His hand is over the hole of the cobra. But by chapter 65, the cobra is judged. It's happened. We've already moved through Isaiah 53. And that Son of God has disarmed all rulers and authorities. The serpent has no power anymore. Whereas in Isaiah 11, he's still working. Suggesting that Isaiah 11, so here we are, we're looking at the mountain from different angles. We're going around the mountain, and all of these texts are describing the mountain in the future. But it may be that as they're looking, it's like even right now, as I look out on Addis, I can see a skyline, and there are some taller buildings and some shorter buildings. But it's not completely clear to me, even as I'm looking out here, is that building tall because it's closer to me? Or is that building tall because it's very tall? And I can't quite tell. I think the prophets had that vision. They're looking toward the future, and they're seeing the events related to the Messiah. They know something about the timing of his coming, but when the mystery is revealed, all of a sudden it becomes clear. It's like we get a higher purview as we're looking down on the city, and now we can see which buildings are first and which are second. Which buildings are actually tall or they're just closer. Because now we have a different perspective, a higher view. And as Isaiah goes around the mountain of God, he's seeing things that we can tell there's a progression. Isaiah 11, it appears the child is ready to judge, grab, strike the serpent. But by Isaiah 65, he's been struck. But we don't quite know And all this is happening in relation to the mountain of God, to Jerusalem, and that mountain has filled all things. When we get to Daniel, we're going to see that the mountain, it grows into a mountain and covers the earth. Like the mountain of God fills everything. But the question becomes, does all of this happen at one time? Or is it stretched out? And now we believers living in the New Testament time, we know these mountaintop texts get stretched out. But already in Isaiah, I think we're seeing a progression. From Isaiah 11 to Isaiah 65, it's talking about the same reality. The Messiah is in charge, but by the time we get to Isaiah 65, we've moved in the story to now the serpent is judged, whereas in Isaiah 11, he's about ready to be judged. Now, one other note of timing. Look at verse 10. Look at verse 10 with me in Isaiah 11. In that day, the day of the mountain of the Lord, when perfect peace exists. Now, let me just make this comment. No, I'll make it after we look at the text. In that day. So we're talking about the same time. In that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a banner, as a signal. Think of a warrior's banner, where they hold it up on a standard and there's a flag that identifies, I'm for his team. Or as in the Olympics, when nation after nation goes in to the great stadium and every nation has their banner representing, this is who we stand for. Well, now this banner is a person elevated up, and all who follow him say, he's the one we stand for. He's the one we represent. And a banner is going to be elevated, a signal for the peoples. This is where we go. This is where we need to come. You're wondering, where do we go? And you see the banner, and now you know where to follow. It'll be a signal for the peoples. Of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. Notice that this is an international gathering, looking to the banner. And it says, his resting place will be glorious. Now, does any of your Bibles have a footnote, a cross-reference, sending you to the New Testament? At Isaiah 11, verse 10. Anyone have a cross-reference? Romans 15:12. So let's look there. Romans 15:12. It's up on the screen. We have a quotation. Let's put it into context. I tell you that Christ became a servant. Do you think Paul's just talking randomly? No. He has his Bible in view. And when he calls Christ a servant, he's drawing from Isaiah. Christ became a servant to the circumcised to show God's truthfulness in order to confirm the promises given to the patriarchs, and in order that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy. Why is Paul engaging in a ministry to the nations? I tell you that Christ became a servant in order that the nations might be saved. That's the argument he just made. And now he's going to use Scripture to justify that claim. What Christ came to do was to save the nations. How do I know? Let's look at the law, the prophets, and the writings. First off, as it is written, I will praise you among the Gentiles and sing to your name. Where's this from? Psalm 18:49. 15:10, and again it is said, rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people. So where's the Psalms from? What part of the Bible? Law, prophets, or writings? Writings. Now we come to Romans 15:10. Rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people. It's from Deuteronomy 32:43. Law, prophets, writings. Law. Now we come to 15:11. Praise the Lord, all you Gentiles. Let all the peoples extol him. Psalm 117:1. Writings. So writings, law, writings, prophets. Isaiah. And again Isaiah says, the root of Jesse will come, even he who arises to rule the Gentiles. In him will the Gentiles hope. Now, that is word for word what's in the Septuagint of Isaiah 15:10. So it's worded a little bit differently than in the Hebrew text, but it's that verse. The nations are going to hope in Christ. And Paul uses this verse to say, that's why I'm going to the Gentiles. So here's what's significant about that. Paul sees in his day, starting 2,000 years ago, that Jesus was already elevated as a banner. And he is being elevated as a banner through the ministry of Paul. Paul's giving us clarity about the fulfilling. When is Isaiah 11 being fulfilled? Paul doesn't say it's only in the future. Paul says it's being fulfilled in his day. When is it that this Spirit-empowered branch, shoot from the stump of Jesse, will rise? In Paul's day. When is it that he will be anointed by the Spirit? It's already in Paul's day. But here's the significance as well. When is it that perfect peace will come and the child king will rule and stand over the hole of the cobra? Verse 10 of our passage. Look. In that day. So if verse 10 is being fulfilled today, that means already today this child king is reigning. Already the serpent is afraid, knowing that his time is short. Already he has established peace. But when we look out there and when we listen to this music, we remember things are not right and there isn't perfect peace. But there is if you're at the mountain. This is Babylon. This isn't the mountain. There's two cities in Revelation. The mountain of God, which is Jerusalem, and then Babylon. And where do we live? Where are we citizens? Here? No. But the mountain has risen, and Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father, says Peter in Acts 2. He is ruling and reigning today, and he has already put the serpent, all the rulers and authorities under his feet. And he will return, and he will cast Satan into the pit of fire. So we may not be to Isaiah 65 yet. Behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth. Behold, I create Jerusalem. That's what we read in Isaiah 65. It was Isaiah 65, 17 and 18. Look at here. For behold, my question is, how do we compare, if Isaiah 11 is now, and here we are, nations gathered together, different tribes, different tongues, already gathered to the throne, not having weapons, but being fellow gardeners in God's great world, working the new creation. You and I. And what's happened? Not animosity, but peace. If Ethiopia was to ever fight the USA, may it never be, you and I, we're still at peace. That's how it's supposed to be in the church. All of us, international, gathering together, not bound by any geopolitical state. We are the ultimate nation of God, gathered to the mountain of God, under the reign of God, through the Messiah of God. And that's already a reality today. The banner has already been lifted. We have already gathered to Him, fulfilling what Paul was saying. The mission is that more people in this day would be gathered as we hope in the fulfillment of this when the new heavens and the new earth will fully be realized. And when the serpent will now be eating dust as his food, fully judged. And so what I'm saying is we're living in the new creation, but the new heavens and the new earth have not yet fully been realized. We're still waiting for Revelation 21 to happen. And that's why John, here it is, behold, I create new heavens and new earth. Be glad and rejoice, for I create Jerusalem. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down. He links the new heavens and new earth with Jerusalem in Revelation 21, just like Isaiah links the new heavens and the new earth with Jerusalem in Isaiah 65. And this is the future reality. On the other side of Satan's judgment in Revelation 20, Revelation 21 and 22 are unpacking the final realized state of the new heavens and the new earth. The new city, grounded on the foundation of the apostles, and all of the nations gathered there as the new Israel of God, worshiping the Lord. Paul says Isaiah 11 is now. John suggests Isaiah 65 is still what we're hoping in. But it's already been inaugurated. The new creation has dawned in the person of Christ. Revelation 19 cites Ezekiel 39, Gog and Magog. It echoes the Gog and Magog text, specifically from Ezekiel 39. Then, the mention of Gog and Magog is explicitly used in Revelation 20. In Revelation 19, it speaks of the battle, although that's in the Greek text. In the ESV, it says a battle. It's the battle. Revelation 20 mentions the battle. It's the battle when the prophet, the false prophet, and the beast are thrown into the lake of fire. It's the battle when the dragon is thrown into the lake of fire. And because Revelation 20 and Revelation 19 together both allude to Ezekiel 38 and 39, it suggests to me that Revelation 19 and 20 are talking about the same reality, not a different reality. And what that means to me is that Revelation 20 is actually one of seven, I understand, seven recapitulations that John, just like Isaiah, walking around the mountain, talking about the same reality from different angles, that John has a vision of the first coming of Christ and the second coming of Christ and beyond. And he retells that story 7 times from different angles. And that Revelation 20 is the beginning of a new cycle. That Revelation 20 chronologically does not follow Revelation 19, but Revelation 20 actually restarts the cycle, taking us all the way back to the first appearing of Christ, and then taking us further than any of the other cycles do, all the way into the new heavens and the new earth. And within that framework, I understand the millennium of Revelation 20 to be now. that the reign of Christ is now, that the binding of Satan is now. And then at the end of this age, he'll be let loose and then overcome. At the end of Revelation 20 and thrown into the pit. And that overcoming period is exactly what Revelation talks about. The exact same battle where the man on the white horse will appear and bring all evil to an end. So that's how I'm understanding the framework, and that would be called an amillennial framework. Or I prefer not to say no millennium, millennial, but rather to say a realized millennium. Meaning that's happening now. Jesus, according to Acts 2, is already on the throne. According to Luke 11, Satan has already been thrown to earth. The strong man has already been bound. And because of that, it doesn't mean it means that he is able to deceive, but not at the way that he ever was. That's why missions has gone global. That's why you and I are followers of Jesus today, because Satan has no longer the power right now to deceive the nations like he used to be able to deceive in the Old Testament period. So that's how I'm understanding. I'm seeing Revelation 12 and Revelation 20 talking about the same thing, the same age. And not everybody does, if they see a progressive understanding in a future millennium. But regardless, Revelation 21 is talking about the new heavens and the new earth on the other side of the millennium. And both of us would agree on that reality, that the millennium has happened by the time we get to Revelation 21. The judgment has happened by the time we get to Revelation 21 and 22, and that's portraying the age of perfect peace, no more tears, no more pain, that is still future. Are you tracking with me on that response? So wherever people are on the millennium, it doesn't change, I don't think, the vision of the new heavens and the new earth in Revelation 21. I do see Revelation 20 as referring to a period of now, that the souls of the dead are now, the martyrs are now up in heaven, anticipating the second resurrection.